all have issues. We all have like issues, and regions are different, and we have different issues. The bottom line is we start not 1 December like a lot of the snowmobilers believe that's all we start, and when we start. You know, 1994, if I'm not mistaken, Bill, is when the first time we had a trail pass, trail permit, trail sticker. What was the proper name back then for it? What was on that? It was different.
No, it was always called the Michigan Trail Permit.
Was it all? Okay, I thought it had a different name to it.
We wanted to change it.
Okay. So, 94, and I'd like Bill to give a quick spiel here, but the dollars and cents in that trail sticker back then was $10, right, Bill?
Yes.
And it started because we realized we needed some money if this program was ever going to get off the ground and take off to where we thought it may be. And Bill, I'm going to let you slide from there, and I'll finish up.
Well, in 1994 is truly when we did pass the legislation. We actually started talking about it in 1991. And let me even go back further than that. We actually had an out-of-state user fee that we actually passed in 1983. It was in for 1 season, and then not even 1 season, about a half a season, because it got implemented in December. And didn't get properly implemented back then, and at the same time Illinois, Wisconsin, and Minnesota all wrote, Iowa, Ohio, their state associations all wrote letters to UPTRA, the Upper Peninsula Travel, and Michigan Travel Bureau, saying they were going to boycott Michigan because they didn't want to pay an out-of-state user fee to come in and ride. That year, 1984, saw abundant snow in all of Michigan. Down in Edwardsburg, they were running sleds most of the winter, as well as Wisconsin. Indiana, Ohio trails were open. Well, Ohio's one trail was open.
Thank you.
So everybody had snow, so of course, then the tourism people said, look, nobody came because they're boycotting us, when in reality they didn't come because they didn't have to, because they all had snow in their own areas. The following year, that was ripped out of the legislation on the last day of session in December of 1985. So that left us back to fend for just registration fees to put in the trails, and the registration at that time was $15 3-year registration. Money didn't go very far. Fast forward to we need more money, we start talking about an out-of-state trail permit again, and again, those factions reared their ugly heads and said, you know, we're going to boycott you, we don't need them, we don't want it, we don't, you know, we spend all of our money in Michigan and you're just going to hurt yourselves. And about midstream, Jim, probably a year and a half after we started with the outstate, we changed our tune. We said, let's just put in a Michigan trail permit. And because we were talking about raising our registration in Michigan and putting it out of state permitted. Well, let's not raise our registration. Let's put a permit in, and everybody has to pay the same. Whether I'm from Michigan, Indiana, Ohio, everybody pays the same to fund the trails. Well, all of a sudden, all of those people from out of the other states couldn't argue with it anymore because we were willing to pay the same thing. Legislation passed, and we were the first one in the, other than Old Forge, New York, to put in a permit fee of any kind anywhere. And so, and some of the reason, obviously the biggest reason did it was to fund the trails. But the other big reason was the way the legislation was written in the snowmobile law. Every time we raised our registrations, law enforcement got a chunk of it, law got a chunk, Secretary of State got a chunk, everybody got a bigger chunk. And so even though we raised it up to this level, we only got about half that because the state governments would take it off. And it wasn't until we actually got enough power in the legislature in the mid-90s that we actually raised the registration from $15 to $22, but we actually then went in and told the dollars exactly where they were going to go. So Secretary of State could only get $3 out of a registration. DNR law could only get $5 out of a registration. $5 went to the Snowmobile Trail Improvement Fund, and $7 went into a sheriff grant program. So we've made that legislation walk and talk, and that's 22 a state. If you look around other states, their registrations have climbed, where we've kept ours at 22 because our trail permit is where we fund the trails from. And that's the way we need to continue. I know there's been a lot of talk about combining the two. Why do we have to do one for 3 years and one for 1 year? Because of the way the law is written and the registration. It's just too hard to keep everybody's fingers out of the pie, doing it another way, putting it all, lumping it all together. So, and it gives us more flexibility with a trail permit. Now we just need to get smart and regulate how much the department can take out of our trail permit money for administering the program. So that'll be coming.
Thanks.
Yep.
I guess I don't want to sit here and bore you with statistics and facts, but there's a lot of things that is misunderstood about the program, how it started, and the grant sponsors, I found out through the last probably 4 or 5 years, are just as confused of the program as I was, and still am at times. Because every time you turn around, there's another change in the grant handbook, or another change. The DNR states, well, this is the way we interpreted it, not the way it has you thought it was interpreted. We've had a lot of issues with that. Bottom line is, guys and gals, if the grant sponsors are happy, if things are working fine, then snowmobiling in the state is going to excel. Does anybody disagree with that statement before I go any farther? If the grant sponsors are happy, I'm not saying that everything's going to be peachy keen in this beautiful little glass, but if the grant sponsors are generally happy and they have the tools to work with, they're going to do a job that is going to be unbelievable. Right now, when MSA leadership and the past leadership has gone beyond the state, gone to functions that is nationally and international, this state is looked upon as one of the premier states to ride a groomed trail because of the system we have and the dedication of the grant sponsors that do the work. It's not Joe Blow standing in the corner selling a snowmobile, because I've got issues with them boys too. They want to come to the trough and feed great but not want to do nothing. I have an issue with that. I have an issue with anybody that comes to the trough to feed and don't put any effort to help. That's where I have an issue. And that's just one of them. So, there's not a grant sponsor out there. There's 69 grant sponsors, if nobody really knew the total there. There's 69 grant sponsors, 6,500 miles of trails. But them grant sponsors maintain the trails. Again, it's more facts and figures. What does it mean? That means that the premier trails in the state of Michigan are more than just on the hardcore websites. There's people out there, there's senators, representatives at the federal level understand what we do here. And that's where I have another issue is, Governor, we've got some issues that we have. Sometimes I think that the governor's office turns a deaf ear. And I don't understand why. Because, again, let's go back to that billion-dollar industry that snowmobiling does. It's not because snowmobile is just there. It's because the grant sponsors make that happen. I always come back to that grant sponsor. And we say, well, Don, you're MSA president. What the hell do you have to do with grant sponsors? I'm one of them. And I know there's a lot of guys and gals out